Imagine a nation spiraling into chaos. That's the beginning of the Syrian Civil War. It's a tale of a peaceful uprising turned violent conflict, all sparked by the wave of democratic fervor that swept across the Middle East and North Africa, known as the Arab Spring. This wave of change inspired the Syrians to rise against their government, demanding social and political reforms. However, instead of dialogue, the government responded with brute force, turning cities into war zones. This violent crackdown ignited a nationwide unrest, transforming peaceful protesters into determined rebels. It was amidst this chaos that the Free Syrian Army was born, a group of defectors from the military who sided with the people and took up arms against the regime. This marked the start of an armed rebellion, a struggle for freedom that soon escalated beyond anyone's expectation. Before we knew it, Syria was on the brink of a full-blown civil war. The year is 2012, and the conflict in Syria is escalating at an alarming rate. A once-contained struggle has spread across the nation like a wildfire, with multiple factions joining the fray. The opposition to the government is no longer just the voice of the discontented public. It now includes a medley of rebel groups, each with its own agenda. The situation becomes even more complex as foreign powers intervene, each backing different factions for their own geopolitical interests. The battlefield grows crowded and the lines blurred as these nations play a high-stakes game of political chess on Syrian soil. In the midst of this turmoil, a new player emerges, the extremist group known as ISIS. Their rise adds another layer of complexity to an already convoluted conflict, turning it into not just a civil war but a global concern. The Syrian landscape was becoming a chessboard for global powers, with ordinary citizens caught in the crossfire. As the war raged on, a dire humanitarian crisis was unfolding. The Syrian Civil War had an unimaginable impact on civilians who found themselves trapped in a nightmare of violence and despair. Millions were forced to flee their homes, leading to one of the largest displacement crises in recent history. The refugee situation was equally devastating, with countless Syrians seeking refuge in neighboring countries and beyond. Atrocities committed during the war were chilling, with civilians often bearing the brunt of the conflict. Bombings, chemical attacks, sieges. The war spared no one, not even the most vulnerable. In response to this catastrophe, the international community sprang into action, albeit amidst a sea of challenges. Aid agencies, NGOs, and countries around the globe poured resources into Syria, providing food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Yet the scale of the crisis often overwhelmed these efforts. In the midst of war, the world witnessed one of the worst humanitarian crises of the 21st century. Fast forward to today, the war is ongoing and its implications far-reaching. This conflict, now more than a decade old, remains in a state of stalemate, a grim testament to the complexities of modern warfare. On a geopolitical scale, the Syrian Civil War has strained relations between major powers, creating a volatile, high-stakes game of influence and control. It has destabilized the region, fueling further unrest and uncertainty in an already tumultuous part of the world. But the implications extend far beyond borders and politics. The Syrian people bear the brunt of this conflict. The future, once filled with promise, is now marred by the echoes of war. The ripple effects of this crisis will be felt by generations to come, from the refugees seeking safety to the children growing up in the shadow of conflict. The Syrian Civil War, a stark reminder of the devastating costs of conflict, continues to shape the course of history,